Matthew walked through the snowy woods, knee-deep in snow. It had been in particular a snowy winter this year. Matthew had retired 10 years ago, bought a sturdy house in the countryside, a half-day's drive from the nearest town, and lived alone in it. The last years before retirement, he dreamed so much about solitude, about living away from the noisy of the metropolis, not to rush anywhere and not to think about anything. And he succeeded. Matthew found a remote, almost completely extinct village. The people had long ago left, and there were a few houses left, where all people lived, not needed by their children. They live out their lives alone, helpless, sick. Once a month, Matthew traveled to town to replenish his eatable supplies. Before going shopping, he will visit his neighbors, and they will prepare a list of what they need to buy. It wasn't hard for Matthew. He drove his old SUV into town. "You're a good man, Matthew," his neighbors thanked him. "You help us. You do not abandon us. We can get to town on our own. Jack, where are you? Where are you? Come here." Matthew called to his dog. The dog barked loudly. He's seen a squirrel in the tree again, so he's barking, Matthew thought. But the dog was barking, calling for his master. The man saw from a distance that the dog was circling around the bag. Matthew walked leisurely in the direction where the dog was barking. "What did you find there?" The man bent down and moved the bag, but as soon as he realized it was a person, he recoiled. There was an elderly woman laying in the snow. Matthew thought she was dead, moved the frozen body, and the woman suddenly moaned. He rolled her over, patting her shoulders. "Oh, you poor thing. Where did you come from?" Matthew thought. The woman was unfamiliar to him. The man shouldered her and walked towards his house. Sandra had gotten married late. When she met Joshua, the woman was almost 40 years old. The man fell madly in love with Sandra. They met in the park, took walks and talked a lot. Joshua was 45, widowed 10 years ago and never intended to marry again. But a month after he met Sandra, he said, "You know, life is short and you and I are no longer young. So why waste precious months, weeks, days? Let's get married." Sandra looked at him, a strong, sturdy man she liked very much. She was comfortable with Joshua. Sandra agreed. They got married and started living together, enjoying each other's company every day. A few months later, Sandra felt unwell. She went to the doctor, and to her surprise, she found out that she was pregnant. "How could this happen since I'm not a girl anymore?" she wondered. "Why are you surprised?" the doctor answered to her. "And at 45 and at 50 women give birth, and you will give birth to a strong, healthy baby. I congratulate you." But Sandra was not very happy. She didn't know how her husband would react to her pregnancy. She and Joshua had never talked about children. Pensive, she turned home to their small one-bedroom apartment. Joshua noticed right away that something was wrong with his wife. "What did the doctor say, dear? Was it something serious?" he asked. "It's serious," Sandra replied. "I'm pregnant, Joshua. I don't know how it happened." The man was silent, and Sandra was afraid to look at him. But he wasn't silent because he was happy. Joshua's first wife had died in childbirth, and the baby couldn't be saved either. That's why the man was shocked by the news Sandra told him. He was frightened. Sandra was not young. She had never given birth, but how she would bear pregnancy in childbirth. "And what do you think?" Joshua asked his wife. "I want to ask you. What do you think about it? Do you want a baby?" Joshua lowered his eyes. He loved Sandra madly and would have been happy to have a baby in their family. But the fear of the health and life was very strong. I would like a son or a daughter. Can you carry a baby? The doctor said that my health is fine, and women can give birth at 50, Sandra answered. The man came to his wife, embraced her, and looked into her eyes with tenderness. So we will soon be father and mother. Joshua smiled at Sandra and kissed her. At the due date, Sandra gave birth to a healthy, strong boy. Joshua was overjoyed when he picked up his wife and son from the hospital. The boy was named Christopher. Now the parents' whole life was devoted to their only child. They took care of him every day, bought beautiful clothes and toys. And when the boy grew up, they did not give him to kindergarten. Joshua was earning well, and Sandra could afford to stay at home with the child. You don't need to work, said her husband. Raise your son and don't worry about anything. Sandra did not go to work even when the boy went to school. She carefully prepared her son's breakfast and then waited for him from school with a delicious lunch. His mother helped Christopher to do his homework, made sure that he was always neat and clean. She also always gave him money for pocket money. The boy did not know any refusal in anything, and when the guy was 16 years old, Joshua became seriously ill and got sick. Sandra took him to the best doctors, paid money, but the improvement did not come. Gradually, her husband's savings were pumped up. Sandra had to go to work, but because she had not worked for a long time, she was taken almost nowhere. The woman could only get a job as a wareswoman in a supermarket, and one weekends she worked part-time in a cafe washing dishes. During a year of illness, Joshua became very weak and died. Christopher became withdrawn. For a whole month, he did not speak to Sandra, was silent, but did not cry, did not shed a single tear. Sandra grieved for her husband, worried about her son, and didn't know how to go on. Christopher began to leave home, drop out of school, and disappeared all the time. One day, Sandra noticed that he was too cheerful, rejoiced the boy stopped grieving for his father. But when she looked closer, she saw that the son was drunk. He was staggering from side to side. Son, why are you drunk? Didn't your father and I teach you that alcohol is very harmful? Leave me alone, Mom. I'm fine now. I don't feel the pain of losing my father. He ruined my whole life and he left, Christopher replied. You mop the floors at the store, and what I'm supposed to do? Study, son, and then get a job. Sandra tried to hug the boy, but he closed the door to his room in front of her. Christopher started drinking. He brought home a noisy group of people who were loud day and night, always bringing a new batch of alcohol, smoking some kind of weed, the smell of which, spreading through the room, drove Sandra crazy. Stop behaving like that, she scolded her son. You have turned our cozy apartment into a place where alcoholics gather. Soon you will become one yourself. I don't care. And if you don't like it, get out, Christopher told her. Where will I go? Sandra was confused. This is my house. This is where we were happy with your daddy. This is where they brought you from the hospital. Then shut up and don't open your mouth. Her son shouted rudely at her. No, sweetie. If you don't stop this outrage, I will be forced to take action. Sandra closed herself in her room and thought, how could it be that a good, obedient boy turned into a monster? Had she and her husband raised him badly? No, they didn't. Alcohol and bad company were to blame. With heavy thoughts, Sandra fell asleep, and when she woke up, she heard a rustle. Christopher had entered her room and was rummaging through her dresser. What do you want in there? Her mother asked, getting out of bed. Money? Where's the money? Tell me now. He yelled at his mother. If you need money, go and earn it. Sandra got angry. And I'm not giving you a penny. Christopher got angry, pushed the elderly woman on the bed and began to strangle her. Where is the money? He yelled and Sandra fought back, wheezing, losing strength. There. She raised her hand with the last of her strength and pointed to the closet. There, under the linens, were several bills Sandra had set aside for a rainy day. Christopher took the money and left the room, leaving his mother alone. Toward evening, he came home with a rowdy group of drunk, dirty, poorly dressed guys. They were drinking, smoking, and yammering. Then a fight broke out between Christopher and some bully with a black eye. Sandra's patience ran out, so she called the police. Everyone in the apartment was taken to the police station. That night, Sandra slept well for the first time in months. But the next day, she had a real nightmare. When Christopher returned from the police station in the evening with his body, he told his mother, "Pack up." "Where to, son?" she asked in surprise. "We are going to a place you will like." Naive Sandra thought that her son wanted to surprise her, that he had come to his senses. The woman put on her coat and boots and left the apartment after her son and his friends. It was already getting dark outside. The boys put her in the car, and the car drove out of the yard. "Where are we going?" Sandra asked, noticing that they were already outside the city and that it was dark outside. But Christopher didn't answer her. Sandra had a bad feeling, a sense of a danger. "Christopher, turn the car around immediately and take me home," screamed the woman, but the boys only laughed at her demand. The car stopped near the woods. Christopher and his body got out of the car and pulled Sandra out. "Drink," ordered her son, holding out a bottle with some liquid in it. "But I don't want to drink, Christopher. I want to go home," Sandra begged. "And I don't care. Drink, I said." The boy grabbed his mother by the throat and poured some bitter stuff into her mouth. The liquid poured out, running down her face, down the woman's neck, under the collar of her coat. Sandra, choking, swallowing, then passed out. "It's so cold. It must be in the grave," Sandra thought, feeling that she was lying on something cold and her feet and hands were numb with frost. Suddenly, she heard a dog barking and thought she was hallucinating. She was dying and will soon meet Joshua, who was dear to her heart. But some strong hands touched her cheeks. Sandra groaned and lost consciousness again. "Where am I?" Sandra woke up. An unfamiliar, elderly man with a gray beard was leaning over her. "Who are you?" Sandra was frightened. The woman looked around. She was in some wooden house with very aesthetic furnishing. A table, chairs, a closet, and a bed on which Sandra was lying. That was all the furniture. "I found you in the woods," the man said. "My name is Matthew. Do you remember your name?" "Sandra," the woman answered. "That's already good," the man said. "You're very weak. How long did you spend in the woods in the snow?" Matthew asked. "I don't know," Sandra whispered, and tears rolled down her face. She remembered that it was her own son who had left her in the woods to die. How could he do such a cruel thing to his own mother? Okay, I won't ask you anything more," the man assured her, seeing that his questions had upset Sandra. "Here, drink this. It's a tea with healing herbs. They will give you strength." He helped her up and gave her a drink. Sandra felt the warmth spread through her body. Then she fell asleep. Sandra dreamed of Joshua. He was walking to the meeting with a bouquet of flowers, smiling his favorite smile, and she was holding little Christopher in her arms. Suddenly, the cute face of her son became infernal. Abel, ugly. The boy screamed loudly. Our baby is sick, Joshua. Sandra held out her son to her husband, but he turned away and disappeared. Startled, Sandra opened her eyes. Sunlight was streaming through the window. The woman sat up on the bed, threw off the warm blanket, and looked around. Sandra got up and walked to the kitchen. Matthew was cooking something at the stove with his back to her. He didn't notice Sandra right away. "Good morning," she said quietly. The man turned around and looked at her and smiled. "It's almost evening. It will soon start to get dark. How are you feeling?" "Better, thank you," Sandra replied. "Sit down. I've prepared something for you. Let's eat, and you can tell me more about what happened to you." The man put a plate of bread on the table, cut a sausage, poured soup. Sandra ate with pleasure. She had been in the house of this handsome older man for 3 days now, but they had not been able to talk. That evening conversation dragged on almost until morning. Sandra told her, severe, the whole story of her life, starting with meeting Joshua. Sometimes she cried, and Matthew lowered his eyes, thinking about something, not preventing her from letting her tears flow. "When my patience ran out, I called the police and my son was arrested for 24 hours and given a huge fine. So he decided to take me to the woods and leave me here alone. And then you found me." Sandra finished her story. "You're my savior." Matthew listened in silence. Then he said, "You should get some rest, and I have an idea how to help you." Sandra had been living at Matthew's house for a month. They had become very good friends. Sandra enjoyed doing housework, cooking delicious lunches and dinners for Matthew, and on long winter evenings they talked. One day, Matthew was going somewhere. He was putting empty bags in the car, and on the table he spread out sheets of papers with lists of groceries that the neighbors had already prepared for him. Sandra looked at him in surprise. "Once a month, I go into town to buy groceries," he explained to Sandra. "But today, I have one more thing to do. I will come back and tell you about it. Expect news." Matthew's mysterious look intrigued the woman. She waited impatiently for him to return. When she saw Matthew's car from the window, she put the soup on the stove and began to slice bread. But the man went straight into the room and put a piece of paper on the table. "Sign this, Sandra," he said. "What is it?" The woman took the paper in her hands. "It's a statement of claim against your son," Matthew replied. "My old friend is a lawyer. He drew it up for you, and he'll be watching the whole process to see how it goes. Your son tricked you into signing over the apartment in a deranged state, and my friend will give it back to you." Sandra's confused. "Do you want me to leave you?" she asked quietly. "I don't want that, so I took care of one more thing." A question lingered in Sandra's eyes. "I've been to see your son. He leads a very bad life. I saw it all with my own eyes. I know you don't want to send Christopher to jail or foreclose on his home, so it's just gonna be what I've come up with." A month later, there was a trial. Sandra got her apartment back, and Christopher was sent to alcohol treatment. On a hot summer afternoon, an unfamiliar car pulled up in front of Matthew's house. Sandra and her landlord were surprised to think who it could be. No one almost ever come to their remote village. Christopher, wearing a white shirt and jeans, stepped out of the car. In his hands was a bouquet of flowers. "Hello, Mom," Christopher said as he walked up to Sandra. "These are for you. If it weren't for you and Matthew, I will have hit rock bottom. Thank you, my dear." Tears welled up in the boy's eyes, and Sandra just smiled and hugged her son. Now everything will be fine in his life. She was sure of it.